The world had always felt like it was spinning in slow motion for Mia. Her life was a calm, predictable journey, until it wasn't. When she met Arthur, everything changed. He was her sun, the light that filled the darkest corners of her soul. The love they shared was something she had never known before, pure, all-encompassing, and beautiful. They were two hearts beating as one in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. But their love, like all beautiful things, was fragile. Mia had always been a gentle soul. She found peace in the small moments, the quiet afternoons when the sun bathed the world in a soft golden glow. Arthur, on the other hand, was the opposite. He was loud, full of life, and always moved at a speed that left Mia breathless. Yet, their differences only made their connection stronger. He would pull her out of her shell, show her the world outside of her comfort zone, and remind her that life was meant to be lived passionately. They had been together for 3 years when everything changed. It was a morning, just like any other. The sun was rising, the birds were chirping, and Mia was making breakfast when she heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. But this time, it wasn't Arthur returning from his usual morning run. It was a police officer. His face was pale, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Mia," the officer said, his voice trembling. "There's been an accident. Arthur is in the hospital. He's critical." Mia's heart stopped. The world around her blurred as her body moved without her consent. She didn't remember how she got to the hospital, only that her hands shook uncontrollably as she gripped the cold metal of the hospital chair. She could barely breathe, could barely think. All she could feel was the aching emptiness inside her chest. It was as if the world had ripped away her reason for living. Arthur's condition was worse than she could have imagined. The doctors spoke in hushed tones, their words heavy with dread. He had been in a car accident, his body badly injured. His chances of survival were slim. The doctor explained that even if he did survive, he would never be the same again. The news hit Mia like a storm, tearing through the calm that had once defined her life. She couldn't imagine a life without Arthur. He was the one person who had made her feel truly alive. The thought of losing him was unbearable, and yet, it was a reality she had to face. Days turned into weeks, and Mia stayed by Arthur's side, never leaving him. She held his hand, whispered her love to him, and begged him to wake up. But Arthur remained in a coma, his body fighting for life. Mia knew deep down that nothing could prepare her for the possibility of losing him, but she refused to give up on him. She was willing to sacrifice everything, to do anything, just to see him open his eyes again. It was in the quiet moments, when the world outside seemed to fade away, that Mia felt the weight of the pain the heaviest. She would sit beside Arthur's bed, her fingers tracing the lines of his hand, remembering the way it used to feel to hold him close. She remembered their laughter, their quiet conversations, and the way his embrace had always made her feel safe. Now, all she had were the memories, and even those seemed to slip through her fingers like sand. She would often find herself wondering if it was all worth it, the pain, the heartache, the sacrifices. Was love enough to save him? Was love enough to hold on to when everything else seemed to be falling apart? The nights were the hardest. The hospital halls were eerily quiet, and Mia would lie in the uncomfortable chair beside Arthur's bed, her eyes searching his face for any sign of recognition, any flicker of life. She had long stopped counting the days and nights. Time had lost its meaning. The only thing that mattered now was Arthur, and the hope that he would return to her. But with each passing day, that hope seemed to fade just a little bit more. One evening, after yet another long day of waiting, Mia found herself standing outside the hospital, staring at the stars above. She needed to get away, just for a moment, to breathe. The air felt cool against her skin, but it did nothing to ease the burning ache inside her heart. She closed her eyes, her thoughts drifting back to the days when everything had felt so perfect. Arthur's laughter echoed in her mind, the sound of his voice calling her name, the warmth of his embrace. But it was all fading, like a dream she couldn't quite hold on to. It was then that Mia felt a strange presence behind her. She turned around, her heart skipping a beat, but it wasn't Arthur. It was a nurse, her expression somber but kind. "There's something you need to see," the nurse said gently. Arthur is waking up." Mia's heart raced. She felt the rush of adrenaline in her veins, her body trembling with excitement and fear. She didn't say a word. She simply followed the nurse back into the hospital, her mind unable to comprehend the hope that was slowly blossoming in her chest. Arthur's eyes fluttered open as Mia entered the room. His gaze was confused at first, but then, as if remembering the world around him, he focused on her. For a moment, neither of them said anything. They just looked at each other, as if trying to understand if this was real. "Mia," Arthur whispered, his voice hoarse, barely audible. Tears filled Mia's eyes as she sat beside him, taking his hand in hers. She couldn't speak, couldn't find the words to express the overwhelming relief and love that filled her heart. She had feared this moment would never come, but here it was. Arthur was alive. He had come back to her. "I'm here, Arthur. I'm here," Mia whispered, her voice breaking. "You're going to be okay. We're going to be okay." But even as she said the words, a part of her knew that things would never truly be the same. Arthur had survived, but the road ahead would be difficult. The injuries he had sustained were severe, and the doctors had warned that his recovery would be long and uncertain. There were no guarantees. But Mia didn't care. She would stay by his side, just as she always had. Arthur's recovery was slow. There were days when he seemed to make progress, and others when it felt like he was slipping away from her again. The pain of his injuries was constant, but it was nothing compared to the pain of seeing him struggle, of watching him fight to find his way back to the man he had once been. Through it all, Mia never wavered. She stayed with him, helping him relearn the simplest tasks, offering him the strength he needed to keep going. She knew that love wasn't always about the grand gestures. Sometimes, love was found in the quiet moments, the way she held his hand when he was in pain, the way she whispered words of encouragement when he felt like giving up, the way she kissed his forehead when the tears wouldn't stop. Mia's love was unconditional, and it was in that love, in the sacrifice she made every day, that Arthur found the strength to heal. The road ahead was uncertain, but they would face it together. In the darkest hour, Mia had held on to hope. She had embraced the power of love, and in doing so, she had discovered the resilience of the human spirit. The pain, the heartache, the fear, they were all part of the journey. But in the end, it was love that had brought them through. And as long as they had each other, there was nothing they couldn't overcome.